Hello, this is Pressure Point. I'm your host, Valerie Dudoward. Our topic this program, Journey to Healing, Parts 1 and 2. For Part 1 of the program, I'd like to welcome my guest for this program, Shirley Harding. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Shirley, 4 years ago, you learned of something that was to alter the course of your life. Could you share what that was?
Well, I learned that I had lobular breast cancer in both breasts. And yeah, that would be an understatement if you said it changed the course of my life, yeah.
What was your initial response to that?
Shock, terror, anger. And I just couldn't believe it. And all mixed in with that was a sense that I was going to beat this, or that we were going to beat this, or that somehow I was going to get through this. So that was one of my initial reactions, was no way, we're gonna get through this.
Other than you're internalizing some of the emotions and having to deal medically in the way that we think of medically in terms of Western medicine and doctors, what other kinds of avenues did you explore early on?
Oh, anything that I could. I explored a healer who was a Celtic healer. A healer who, very famous Chinese man. And very early on, because of the work I was doing, I had contact with the Native community and Native people. And so I was offered a ceremony, a Native ceremony.
How did you feel about that? Was that something that you had sought, or did it come to you and you had to think about whether you participate in that?
I didn't seek it. It was offered to me. And my initial reaction was, wait a minute, this is, we'd been talking about cultural appropriation, and I was just very, very conscious of that. And the person I was talking to, her words will ring in my ears forever, because she just said, it is not ours to keep, it is ours to share, and we're offering that to you. And I was just overwhelmed by that. And so there was that whole cultural aspect that I didn't expect. I explored homeopathic, naturopathic kinds of supplementary healing ways too. But I think one of the main things that was given to me was support and love from what I call my circle of angels, from people who I never would have imagined.
Who were some of these people?
Well, let me just tell you a little bit how it started. When some people heard of my diagnosis, there were two friends, one who lives in Saskatchewan and one who lives in West Bank, who had been part of a women's group that I was in Toronto, decided that they would meditate the same time every day for me. And so it started with the two of them, and then it was added to by the other women who were in the group. And before I knew it, there were people all across this country who, colleagues from work from Toronto, people from everywhere that were all meditating at the same time. And that included, of course, my family and my friends from Vancouver. So the time we meditated here was 6:30 in the morning. And people would say to me, do you mind if I join your group? And I'd say, mind? I need all the help I can get. And no, I consider it an honor. The biggest surprise was the Aboriginal community who didn't know me, and who were there and willing to be there, not just with words, but with their presence. And as part of the ceremony, people were asked to pray, and time again, somebody would pray for Shirley, my sister, Shirley, my friend, and I went, holy, I don't even know these people. So that was overwhelming for me. It's one thing to have your friends support you, but it's another thing to have people that you don't know.
That leads me into another area that I think of at a very personal level when I think, how would I react with an illness that threatened my very life, my being on this plane or on this earth? And I guess for me that lends itself to asking myself a couple of different questions. First of all, am I a person to whom asking for help or seeking help would be difficult, for whom that would be difficult? Am I a person who finds it hard to ask others for help? And the second part of that I'd ask myself is, who would I ask? How would I ask them? And who do I define as my community?
As your community. Are you asking me these then?
What did you come up with for yourself? Or did you ask yourself those things?
Well, I'm a person who has been programmed all my life to be strong and be able to cope with everything. And so to ask for help was a new experience for me. To receive the love and the affection and the prayers of all of those people was just a new experience. And so what I had to learn was to receive. And then I think once I'd learned a little bit about receiving, then it was okay to ask. It's a little hard to define because they are intertwined. But I know that my biggest task was to receive. And
how did it work with the specific instance of the ceremony with the Aboriginal people who had offered you this opportunity?
Well, I accepted that they wanted to do that for me and began at the instruction of the medicine person much preparation for this ceremony. And I remember one of the most important things he said to me was, you have to have faith. And you have to have faith in the medicines and faith that this will heal you. Because I also was very supported by my own church community. I mean, incredibly supported. So that when I would go forward for prayers, I would just cry. I mean, the tears would just stream down my face because I couldn't say anything. And so it was a risky adventure for me to do this, and yet I knew that I was to do this. I knew right in here that I was to do this. I knew it was important, and I've never prayed harder in my life than those 3 months preparation for the ceremony.
I know that because of the differences among the nations and observances regarding secrecy or silence about ceremonies, that you might only be able to speak in generalities. And given that, what can you share with us about what actually happened in that ceremony? Or what preparation you might have had to make for it, if any?
Well, the preparation involved going to the river and praying 3 times a day with tobacco and making 405 tobacco ties. Now, that may not sound like much, but let me tell you, everyone has to be prayed over with, and you use a smudge with each one. And I remember saying to Floyd, so what am I praying for all these times? He said, your healing. And I know that one of the things I've learned is that the church didn't ever teach me that. That it was another culture's generosity and gift to me to say, you pray for yourself. And the ceremony was held in darkness. It was many, many, many hours long. And there were many spiritual things that happened in it. The overwhelming feeling for me was that this was rooted and grounded in something so ancient and so real that I felt just so humbled by it. And it was a miraculous kind of thing.
As an Aboriginal person, I guess, in particular, and secondly, as a person who was brought up in the church to some degree, I didn't often, as I was growing up, feel a sense of comfort within myself of the spiritual expressions of my Aboriginal culture and the spiritual expressions of the religion, the Christian religion that I grew up in. And it interests me, and I think I find it very exhilarating that you found a comfort in both.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. And from people who would not call themselves church people or religious or whatever word we want to use, but people who cared enough about me that they would meditate. They would think about me and send me their energy. And I found that quite overwhelming too. Because I think that if we want to talk about community, community is often defined in a way that it's you and I and the people who are near us and around us and that we can touch and they can touch us. And while all of that was tremendously important to me, I couldn't have done without my friends and people who actually did touch me and hug me and were there every time I got some bad news, and it kept getting worse every time a report came back. They were there literally to hold me and hug me, and so was my husband. And but I learned something new about community. Community, for me, stretched all of those miles and all of those places, and it was almost like a circle within a circle within a circle, and a spiral that just kept moving and having that energy. And I could feel that energy coming into me at that hour that I knew everybody was doing that. So that I'd never thought before about the fact that community could involve someone 3,000 miles away, really, in such a profound way as it was, that they were all of those people who cared enough to be part of that, you know.
So often we hear about the information highway and technology providing us with greater access to more global thinking, and what you're talking about is more global thinking, but not necessarily involving great technology.
That's right. Because they were all real people, and the word just kind of spread between person, and between person. And there's a magic in that, and I don't want to sound trite when I say that, but there's an energy that is so profound, and a love that I could describe it only as a love that I received that was beyond my experience before this. And so you asked me if what happened when I heard. Well, it turned very quickly from, and there were some factors in that, getting an oncologist that I just love. There were some factors in the turnabout in my attitude, but I think part of it was just the support enabled me to kind of keep going, you know.
This has been very encouraging, informative, and as somebody who hasn't faced a life-threatening illness myself, it's really given me some ideas that I can draw on to help support those people in my life who are going through this. And I thank you for this. This has been Pressure Point Journey to Healing Part 1. Thanks to my guest, Shirley Harding. Please stay tuned for part 2 with Brad Newcombe.
Welcome back to Pressure Point. I'm Brad Newcombe, and this is the second part of our program titled Journey to Healing. We read in the newspaper and see on television all the time stories about random acts of violence. Those are things that we think always happen to someone else and never to us. What happens when we or someone close to us is a victim of violence? My guest is Graeme Keirstead, a lawyer who was savagely attacked in court by the estranged husband of a client from his law firm, and he suffered life-threatening injuries. And he's here to talk about the attack and his journey to recovery and recuperation and the silver lining in that story. Welcome, Graeme.
Thank you, Brad.
Well, can we go back to that day in court, and can you tell me what happened?
Well, it was a typical sunny Friday afternoon. I was thinking of nothing better than what I was going to do that weekend. I was representing, I was there on behalf of another lawyer that I work with, representing her client, who was the estranged wife of the fellow that I was going to be up against that day. It was a routine administrative procedure. We were just trying to have this fellow make good on a court order. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the registrar was ready to hear us. I went out, brought him in out of the hallway, and was introducing myself to the court and introducing this fellow to the court when I felt as though I'd been hit in the back of the head with a heavy object. I thought it was a book. The fellow had been carrying a largish briefcase. And I thought, oh no, here's some layperson coming in with a whole bunch of materials that he's going to start, throwing around or whatever. And after that, I didn't really remember too much of anything.
Now, okay, it wasn't a briefcase, it wasn't a book. What was it?
He was apparently, and I say apparently because I've only heard of this, carrying a scythe or a sickle, which is a farm implement, which has a blade approximately 2 feet long. And
describe the injuries that you suffered.
Well, I understand that he struck me 3 times, once across the back of the neck and twice in the head. What he did was caused a deep laceration to the back of my neck, another to my jaw and along the side of my face, and then fractured my skull, driving part of my skull into my brain, subdura, causing some injury that I needed to have surgery for some hours to have it removed from my brain and have my skull patched up again.
Obviously, you don't remember, you remember feeling the blow on the back of your head, and then what's the next thing you remember after that?
Well, after a while, I was a bit dazed, understandably, and I was getting ready to walk out of the courtroom because it seemed like the thing to do. I was walking away, and I was feeling very weak, and eventually I decided it would be a clever idea to lie down. So I did that, and then was shortly thereafter attended by some of the security personnel and paramedics.
And this person has been charged then with attempted murder?
He has. There is an accused in this, and all witnesses say that that's the fellow. I couldn't really.
Okay, okay. So I understand that they're still awaiting trial and so on. Okay, when you sort of gathered yourself, what's it feel like to suddenly, you go to work one day and then suddenly your life has just changed? That hasn't happened to me. What does it feel like to be the victim of a random act of violence? You just were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I was exactly in the wrong place at the wrong time. I had no connection to this person. I was nothing to him. I was just in the wrong place. And one moment I'm just, planning out my weekend. The next moment I'm lying in an ambulance on my way to a hospital. It wasn't for several hours until I realized the severity of what had happened. And at that point, it's basically like entering into an entirely different dimension, like an episode of The Twilight Zone, because everything that I had accepted was turned upside down.
Say more about that. Say more about that. About being the upside down feeling sort of thing, the world that was so different.
Well, in essence, instead of being someone who can count on, just being able to get up and go to work and earn a living, suddenly everything was in jeopardy. I didn't really know whether or not I would be able to continue to be employed in any capacity, or what my recovery would be like. It was all very shocking to go from just normal everyday life where you basically know where the markers are, to lying in a hospital room with a shunt coming out of my head to drain off excess fluid, and IV tubes, and being shot up with morphine, and it's very disorienting.
Mm-hmm. What were the feelings toward this man?
Well, it may have been shock, it may have been morphine, but all I wanted was for him to get the help that he needed at that time. And basically that's all I want for him. I believe that he's psychologically ill. I mean, why would somebody do something like this? I mean, this man is 70 years old. Basically, he's throwing away the rest of his life. And why? Mm-hmm. I meant nothing to him. It's not as though he was venting some personal vendetta against someone. He just was acting out, and I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be fine. So I don't see why he has to suffer. I'm not vengeful.
And we're going to talk about some of the road to recuperation, but I'm also interested because you obviously went to law school, you studied law, you read case after case after case of people in horrendous circumstances and incidents. And now mm-hmm. The tables turned in that way too. How has that changed the way in which you see clients themselves and cases?
That's an interesting point, because I practice a lot of personal injury, plaintiff side personal injury law. And so I deal on a daily basis with people who, through no fault of their own, have become disabled to one degree or another. And my empathy level for these people has really grown, because I know beyond merely the pain and suffering that they've gone through and the way their lives are changed very suddenly and for the worse. I understand the administrative hurdles that they have to go through, just through hospitals, through trying to obtain the best therapy for what they need, whether it's therapy in just coping with the new burdens that life has imposed, or whether it's physical therapy for getting back to the point where they were. It's a great struggle, and I greatly empathize with them.
What about emotional support, and the kind of day-to-day kind of people to lean on? Where did you get that from?
It was remarkable, Brad, because right from the outset, it seemed that everyone I had ever met in my life rallied to my side. The nurses were complaining, jokingly I'm sure, that my hospital room was overpoweringly fragrant because I had some 25 to 30 floral arrangements and balloon arrangements and so on. The hospital administration was keeping almost everyone away from me because there was some media interest at the time. It was fairly sensational what had happened. And so I was heavily guarded and shielded. But my friends, my family came to my side and offered such genuine love without barrier. It was, I'd say it was touching, but that's so trite. I mean, it was overpowering. It was the kind of love I had never felt.
And we were talking just shortly before the program about also people. It wasn't just here in Vancouver. It was extended right across borders and so on. So how did that work? How did you get support from people who aren't even here?
Well, it was remarkable because my family is predominantly in Ontario. My grandmother lives in Northern Ontario in a town called Cache Bay, and of course they were all with me in spirit. My cousin Marcy is a lawyer in Toronto and a very devout Catholic, and she contacted an order of nuns whose name I forget, which my gratitude is not short-lived, just my memory in this instance.
Okay.
And their primary calling, I understand, is to heal through prayer. And she contacted them and explained my situation to them, and they began to pray for me. My grandmother in Northern Ontario contacted the same order in North Bay, and they began to pray for me as well. A friend of mine from Seattle, John Sharp, contacted his mother, who is at the Pacific School of Theology in Berkeley, California, and she contacted some Carmelite nuns who began to pray for me. And so with all of this, cloistered nuns, their prayers are very powerful.
Right, that's right. Yes.
It was remarkable the amount of healing energy I had around me. In fact, my sister went to a psychic, not primarily, I don't suppose, for this, but my circumstance was brought up with that person, and my sister was assured that I had a great white healing light around me, and so that she shouldn't be concerned for my well-being.
Now, and also community here. I know that you're part of a Trinity United Church congregation here. What role did that group of people play?
Well, they came immediately to my aid. I was visited by a number of the members of the congregation, and Linda Irvin, who is one of the ministers, was by my side quite a lot. She was one of the first people I asked for when I was admitted to emerge at Royal Columbian. And she's been a real pillar of strength for me for years. She's a remarkable woman, very compassionate, and Jim Hilson is very compassionate as well, who is the other minister there. Their support came through calls, through cards, and through prayer. They prayed for me and included me in their prayers each Sunday for months.
So that there was so you had sort of tangible support, practical support, emotional support, and then you had also the spiritual support as well.
Whole 9 yards. Yeah.
Whole 9 yards. So say a little more about when you talked about a silver lining in this experience. I mean, as for most of us, when we see these things in the newspaper, they are horrible, and we don't want ever to go through them, and no one would wish that on anyone. But you've found something in it, so talk about that.
Well, there's no point in dwelling on the negatives in any situation, I don't suppose. For me, no, I wouldn't want to go through this either. All the good that's come out of it is certainly not worth what's happened. But for me, the amount of support that I got from friends and family, and just the way that people came to me, my extended family came to me, the members of the firm where I work, and everyone who works there, and everyone I've met, and it just seemed to pour in. As someone who perhaps has had a difficult time believing in his own value, it was transcendent, because I was suddenly being affirmed by all of these people, and the amount that people cared for me was being made obvious.
Now, the amazing thing is that value was there for you all along, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but I just didn't see it, because people don't express for each other the amount of love that they feel on a daily basis, or the appreciation that they feel.
Now, has it changed the way in which you express love to other people, and as well as receive love?
Yes, I think that in a sense that it's a new beginning for me, and it's enabled me to be able to be more open with people. Because once people have come to, if I have a friend who's come to me and said, Graeme, I love you, I value you, I'm so glad that you're alive, I'm so glad that you're in my life, how can I treat that person with anything but the greatest affection afterward?
And of course it changes you and the relationship itself.
It's made me a much more open person emotionally.
And what about the future? Things look good for your prognosis for work and so on?
Yeah, everything's going to be fine. The residual symptoms are, I would have to say at this point, annoying at best or at worst. And as far as work goes, I'm back at work part-time now. I'm getting a huge amount of support from the people I work with. My clients are very understanding of whatever limitations I might have.
So everything is on the up and up. Unfortunately, we're out of time, Graeme, but it's gone so quickly. But I do want to thank you so much for being here on Pressure Point and sharing your personal story and the positive things that have come from an act of violence.
Thank you.
Thanks. You've been watching Pressure Point, and I've been talking to Graeme Kirstead, a lawyer who was a victim of random violence and has helped turn his life around with the help of others. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brad Newcombe.